Hello, and welcome to Let's Review. Today I want to talk about Sense and Sensibility. Now, for those of you that don't know, this is one of Jane Austen's novels. It's one of six novels that was published. And the reason I want to talk about this one in particular is because of the six novels that I've been reading over the last couple of months, this is the one that I think I connected with most. It's not necessarily my favorite. I think my favorite was Northanger Abbey, but this is the one for sure that I really connected with. And with that in mind, I'm going to talk about something that has nothing to do with how I personally connected with it and everything to do with just something I was seeing that stood out to me because of the time period that this book was written. Before that, I'm going to give a very crude summary. For those of you that don't know, here's some background information. The novel begins with the death of Henry Dashwood's uncle, which leads to Henry inheriting the Northland estate from the deceased relative with the condition that it should eventually pass to Henry's son, John, who was born from Henry's first marriage, and then subsequently from John to his own son. This arrangement leaves Mr. Dashwood's current wife and three daughters, Eleanor, Marianne, and Margaret, with limited financial means should Henry also pass away. And only a year later, Henry does indeed pass away and requests that his son John take care of his stepmother and half sisters. For a brief period, John, who is both a stepson and half brother to the women, fulfills this duty. However, influenced by his wife Fanny, John reneges on his promise to support his stepmother and stepsisters, taking control of the Northland estate and providing them with minimal financial assistance. Subsequently, the Dashwood women are relocated to Barton College following an invitation from a distant relation, Mr. John Middleton. Here they encounter various characters, including Edward Ferrars, Lucy Steele, and the dashing Willoughby. Eleanor, the eldest daughter, develops feelings for Edward, but he is engaged to Lucy. Meanwhile, Marianne, becomes infatuated with Willoughby until his abrupt departure for London, shattering her heart, which he returns later to. He returns the story later, engaged to another woman, which breaks her heart even further. Lucy reveals that Edward's engagement to Eleanor is a secret, causing inner turmoil for Eleanor somewhere around the midpoint of the novel. Later, Marianne falls mysteriously and very seriously ill. Well, mysteriously might be a strong word, but very seriously ill as she receives care from the overly attentive Mrs. Jennings, which is their distant relatives in law. Ultimately, Eleanor and Edward do marry at the end. Meanwhile, Lucy ends up marrying Edward's older brother Robert around volume 3, and ends up with this guy named Colonel Brandon, who was not previously mentioned in this summary, but anyway, they all are wed and they all are kind of ending on a happy note. With three volumes and so much going on in this love drama, I definitely missed more relevant parts of the plot in this summary, but I tried to touch on what I thought were some of the biggest developments. Also, Margaret is the youngest sister and sort of forgotten in the background for much of the story, so sorry for not mentioning where she ends up. She's not married, she's too little. Um, for those that enjoy kind of a Reddit style romance drama, I think that this book is probably like a really interesting and fun read. I personally love the Reddit stories, and I felt like when I was listening to the audiobook of this as I was reading the book itself in text, I thought that this was kind of like hitting some of those notes, especially with like Lucy Steele telling Eleanor about her secret engagement. With that in mind, I actually want to focus a little bit more on Marianne. In chapter 12 of Sense and Sensibility, we discover that Willoughby has been given or perhaps taken a lock of hair from Marianne. Now, this is set in Georgian era England, and particularly during Jane Austen's time, this would have been around like Regency. This was like contemporary literature for her time. So she's either given or had a lock of her hair taken by her love interest, and traditionally presenting a lock of hair to one's someone you have affection for was symbolized as a very deep affection and devotion, especially when anticipating a long separation. And initially, I interpreted this as some sort of foreshadowing of impending separation that follows between the two lovers quickly after this revelation. They do separate, and I thought, great, I've met my mark for sure. I've caught the foreshadowing. Goody to me. However, I now am starting to wonder though whether or not there's a more ominous undertone to this gesture. Marianne and Willoughby share a fondness for Alexander Pope's poetry in the novel, and their mutual love for poetry plays a very significant role in their romance. And what makes Pope's work kind of stand out among the few poems hinted at or mentioned within the work is that Pope wrote a satirical poem called The Rape of the Lock, which involves the taking of a lock of hair. And the poem itself was kind of mocking the upper class aristocracy of 18th century England, portraying the events as though one might present an epic poem and featuring a young girl, Belinda, having her hair cut by an unwanted suitor named Baron. In mocking the upper class, this group of people, it took this incident very seriously. Readers were meant to view their obsession with fashion and beauty as trivial matters, portraying their concern over the taking of a lock of hair as disproportionate and absurd. However, a more modern interpretation would probably see this as a story about a non consensual invasion on a young lady's person by a suitor who is depicted as having no sense of his age, meaning he's not a child, but he's acting like one. He wants to be with her. She doesn't want to be with him. And in a fit of rejection, he cuts off a lock of her hair when she's turned around, and her response is an emotional outburst. While I doubt that Willoughby has stolen Marianne's hair, he has definitely taken it with him prior to leaving, and I now wonder if Willoughby, by taking Marianne's lock of hair, could symbolize him taking her innocence and thoughtlessly assuming it means nothing, that it can easily be returned without consequence, as he suggests when he officially ends their relationship in a letter. Of course, later he claims that it is one of his, or that it is his fiance or wife or somebody who's really the mastermind behind these letters. But how do we prove that? Um, I don't really know, and I don't really think that we can. It was just really upsetting. Where Pope is mocking the theft of the hair and regards this outburst as completely absurd, Austen seems to show a lot more sincerity and the meaning behind the lock by having it mentioned later in their written exchanges as the two enter that official and very painful breakup. Marianne is also seen with an emotional outburst right after, but given her age and the relationship, it feels very real and perhaps not so unreasonable or unheard of. It just kind of sticks out to me, and I find myself wondering about it quite a bit long after I've left this story. And it's been a few, I want to say a few months at this point since I read it, but I could go back and check. I made a blog post, and this is kind of coming almost directly from my blog post for part of it. But I don't know. What are your thoughts? Please let me know in the comments below. I hope I haven't spoiled Jane Austen for you. It's really, her writing is really amazing, and I feel like I'm so happy I get to read it now. Um, yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for reading. By the way, I'm using the Broadview Press version, which is an academic version of the text. It has great literature at the end that is supplemental reading. So if you're interested in getting more contextual knowledge of what you're reading with Jane Austen, I highly recommend the Broadview Press version or the Norton version. I'm a personal fan of Norton, and I think that they also do great work. With that in mind, thank you again for watching. Bye.